Good afternoon, and welcome back for another edition of the Patrick Riggins Show, hosted by me, Patrick Riggins. Each and every week I am here battling back the forces of governmental control, constantly working to inform and motivate those who are taking on the mantle of saving this country from those who would wish to enslave it. Helping us in this quest is the powerful and enlightening Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network, beaming the message of individual freedom and liberty to all of America and, for that matter, the world. We are here at our new local home station for the Patrick Riggins Show, News Talk 98.7 WOKI, sitting here in the luxuriously appointed studios on Old Kingston Pike. Not New Kingston Pike, Old Kingston Pike. A little less traffic, a little more calm. Yes. Yes, a little more peaceful. A little more peaceful over here, isn't it, Jay? Jay, the show producer. Yes, he's falling asleep in the booth. All right.
Pass the coffee.
Oh, yeah. You can see this is why you tune in to the Patrick Riggins Show. Not only is it informative and educational, it's peaceful and relaxing as well. At least until we get to the bumper music. Well, where to start today? There is so much going on. It is almost impossible to cram everything into a 1-hour show. In fact, I promise you we won't be getting to everything this week, but you can catch the stories, the other stories that we don't get to. We put them on our Facebook page, and you can see that at facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. Again, that's facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. And you don't have to have a Facebook account to go to that page. Just type it in and just ignore the, hey, you need to sign up for Facebook. Just ignore that part. We're also working on a website, and we'll have that announcement in the coming weeks. But getting back to my point, there is so much going on, so much happening, that it is hard to decide where to start and what to talk about. One thing that I want to start off with, and I've hit on it briefly before on this show, but one thing that is interesting to me is how all of a sudden everyone has gotten the old-time libertarian religion now. Oh, yeah, that good old individual responsibility religion. The liberals haven't really talked a lot about it, but the conservatives sure are jumping on the bandwagon. That's how I know we are starting to make a difference, that Americans are starting to wake up, that the voting majority of this country is slowly moving in our direction. Because if it wasn't, no one would be trying to jump out in front of it. None of these conservative talk shows will be trying to mix in some libertarianism along with their conservative government knows best preaching. That differs from liberal government knows best preaching only in degree. You see, both sides, liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats, they both think government should be telling you how to live. The only gripe with one another is how much government should be doing that. The debate is never if it should, only how much. So if you've been listening, I'm sure you have heard a lot of the talk show charlatans trying to sell you on this new mixture of 90% conservatism and 10% libertarianism. If they even mix in that much libertarianism, it might be more like 5% or less. What they are trying to sell you, though, is watered down freedom. It still consists of, or still contains all the judgment, all the restrictions, all the government knows best. They just wrap it in a package of, hey, we're just like those libertarians. We don't like the Republican establishment either. We're for less government spying. Yeah, we're all over that because President Obama and his liberal buddies in Washington have been spying on us, spying on all us Americans, and we don't like it. Of course, to that I say, but Mr. Conservative, what about marriage laws, drug laws, the so-called war on terror, which is really a war on freedom and liberty? What about those issues? That's what I thought. You see, they only believe in all that individual freedom and liberty as it comports to their ideas of how you should be living your life. They don't want the NSA spying on Americans. They don't want people's phone calls being monitored. That's too personal. That's violating someone's rights. But let someone do something in the privacy of their own house. No one else can see what's going on. It isn't affecting anyone else. Then they are all over about butting into your personal business then. Yeah, what you're doing behind closed doors, now it's their business. Talk about it on the phone, though. No, that's none of the government's business. Your personal business as it relates to their agenda, though, that's government business. No problem telling you what to do there. You can't have it both ways. You can't have government sticking its nose into everyone's business in one area and then expect it to mind its own business when it comes to other areas of life. The government has no discipline. It has a crowd mentality. It acts in ways that the individuals making up the government would never act. Well, I guess that's probably an inaccurate statement. I'm sure there are some people who would gladly mind your business outside of government just as much as they do from inside government. But no one has this feeling of being held responsible for their actions. Just look at the arrogance and outright defiance displayed by these agency employees at the congressional hearings these past weeks. They are acting almost like it is our fault for asking questions, that we are inconveniencing them by asking them to answer for their actions. How dare you ask me about my job? It reminds me a little of this clip from a movie I'm sure you'll recognize.
I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way. Otherwise, I suggest you pick up a weapon and stand a post. Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
Now, if you're one of the people who understand what that movie was all about, then you understand the significance of that short speech. A lot of people in this government feel exactly the same way, that they don't have to follow laws. They are above them. You, meanwhile, are expected to obey every single law, because if you don't, they're going to catch up and hold you to account, even though they don't hold themselves to that same standard. Just look at all this IRS news that has been breaking on almost a daily basis. Expensive hotel rooms, huge parties, videos being made that actually make fun of us, their bosses, the people who pay their salaries. Are you so naive as to think this starts and stops with the IRS? I hope not. Every government agency thinks this same way. This is why it is so dangerous to have Congress abrogating their responsibilities of law as lawmakers and pushing that power to government agencies. Agencies unchecked by another branch of government. Oh, sure, Congress says they conduct oversight. If that's true, then why are we having all these problems? All this stuff didn't start 2 weeks ago. It's been going on for years. Where's the oversight? There is none. Just about everything coming out about these scandals is being leaked by insiders. Congress isn't uncovering it. They aren't digging in and looking around to find that corruption. You know, the truth of the matter is, Congress really doesn't want to know about corruption. Because if they are pointing the finger at these agencies, it won't be long before someone starts pointing the finger back at Congress and leaking all their dirty laundry. These congressional representatives sit in these hearings acting all indignant about when all this is their fault. They are the ones creating these agencies. They are the ones not conducting the oversight. They are the ones who allow all this overbearing, overregulating, overtaxing bureaucracies to continue to exist. They could fix all this tomorrow. They could vote to stop funding all these agencies. They could vote them all out of existence. Problem solved. But they won't. They have lots of friends and family who are employed in government. They aren't about to eliminate their jobs, put their relatives out of work, then have to face them at the family reunion? No way. Freedom and liberty are important to them, but not that important. Sorry, if it's If it's between their family sitting in a nice, lucrative government job and your freedom, sorry, you're going to lose that one. We're up on the first break here on the Patrick Riggins Show. We have even more that you'd think that one first segment could be a whole show. But we have 3 more segments to go. We're going to pack them full. Don't miss them. We're going to talk a lot about more of the scandals, more of the hypocrites in Congress, NSA, all sorts of stuff. Don't go away. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show. Jumping in a little early on the song there, YouTube. Not that I don't like YouTube Desire, but it's got a lot we're trying to cram into the show this week. Anyway, what I wanted to jump into this segment was this whole thing about, I'm sitting here looking at the news and looking at these hearings and all this outrage being expressed, and I just can't get this out of my head that the hypocrites are out in force. With all this news about the spying that has been occurring in this country, all this Verizon news, and now this news that, hey, we're also on the internet providers and getting their information. With all this coming out, we have conservative commentators that are screaming and crying how this could happen and how Obama is behind all of this. Now, these are the same people that were pushing this sort of thing back in 2001. We need to have the Patriot Act passed. We have to have it. We can't fight terrorism without it. So, just to refresh your memory, the original act in the Senate was passed October 24th, 2001. 98 senators voted in favor of it. Senator Landrieu, Democrat Louisiana, did not vote. Senator Russ Feingold, he's a Democrat Wisconsin, was the only senator who voted against it. Over in the House, you had 211 Republicans that voted yes for this and 3 no's. Democrats voted 145 yes and 62 no's. 1 independent each was voting yes, and you had 1 voting no. Now, when it came back up for reauthorization on March 2nd, 2006, in the Senate, we still had 89 U.S. senators vote in favor of the Patriot Act reauthorization. Now, senators voting against it, amazingly, let's see here. Yeah, every one of them is a Democrat, except one who's an independent, which is Jeffords, might as well be a Democrat. Akaka, Democrat, Hawaii. Bingaman, Democrat, New Mexico. Byrd, Democrat, West Virginia. Feingold, again, Democrat, Wisconsin. Harkin, Democrat, Iowa. Jeffords, Independent, Vermont. Leahy, Democrat, Vermont. Levin, Democrat, Michigan. Murray, Democrat, Washington. And Wyden, which isn't surprising, Democrat, Oregon. It's not surprising he would vote against it. And Senator Inouye, a Democrat, Hawaii, he didn't vote. But the next day, the House of Representatives voted, and they had 214 yeses and 14 noes. Well, it was the Republicans, 214 yeses, 14 noes. Democrats voted 66 yes, 124 noes, and 1 independent voted no. So all these people are now screaming about how they can't believe this legislation was misused this way. How can the government be getting away with all of this? And you guys were the exact people pushing for this when Bush was in office. And anyone who spoke against it, you called crazy. They were sympathetic towards terrorism. Dr. Ron Paul stood there in Congress and gave speech after speech about how this was bad legislation, how the government could not be trusted with this power. And all these conservative commentators made fun of him, made fun of the libertarians for opposing these types of overreaching and intrusive, and more importantly, blatantly unconstitutional pieces of legislation. Now these conservatives are now bemoaning the fact that government agencies have been caught targeting conservative groups, the IRS, the EPA, and now the NSA. And even more that I'm sure are yet to be brought out. And I'll go ahead and name Rush, Hannity, Levin, all these conservative hypocrites who preach from a limited government Bible, yet hypocritically advocate for the trampling of the rights of people when it serves their party, when their guy is in office, or in these cases, screaming about it when their guy isn't in office. I know they have shows on this radio station, but I'm not going to excuse their behavior just because we share station call letters. That would make me a hypocrite, someone who is excusing behavior that goes against my principles, and I refuse to be that way. That's why you can rely on this show, the Patrick Regan Show, to be faithful to our core principles of libertarianism, of treating people like they are adults, of letting people do what they wish as long as they aren't infringing on someone else's rights. Now, these conservatives are trying to paint these candles as this is how liberal government works. No, this is how all government works, period. If given enough time, all government will try to eventually enslave their populations. Look at history. Our founders did and realized they needed to set some boundaries, otherwise we'd have problems. Now, yes, I'm riding the conservatives a little bit hard, but I expect more out of them. The liberals want total control. They want a police state. The conservatives preach this limited government sermon until they're in office. When they win elections, all that talk goes straight out the window. The liberals don't mind having the government rifling through your trash or looking at your emails or listening in on your phone, as long as it's getting done towards conservatives, although some of them are starting to come around. Look, I'll listen to the other talk shows during the week, and a lot of times just laugh at how two-faced these show hosts can be. You know, I'll go ahead and I give Rush a hard time because he's the leader of the conservative movement. And this week he was having an absolute fit about all this domestic spying. And it'd be funny if it wasn't so sad. He was one of the cheerleaders to pass this Patriot Act, the very law under which most of all of this outrageous behavior has been occurring. All these liberals who were opposing this, they were siding with the terrorist, or they were just trying to oppose President Bush. And I'm sure there was a lot of that to that. Now that the situation is reversed, the conservatives are screaming about it, and the liberals are saying it isn't a big deal. Everything being done is allowed by the law. Heck, they even say it's because George Bush signed the original law. That's why Obama is just doing what his predecessor did. I guess Obama didn't have parents that told him two wrongs didn't make a right, or that if George Bush jumped off a bridge, would Obama do it too? Apparently he will. And if he does, it isn't his fault. He's only following what Bush did, so it's really Bush's fault. If all this doesn't make you seriously question your political affiliations, question who it is you vote for. All you conservatives, if you are concerned about where this country is heading, then more than likely you're really a libertarian. But for some reason you fear having that label. Either you don't want people to think you're some dope-smoking hippie or some pacifist war protester or what. Just man up, stand up, and be counted. Start supporting libertarian candidates because they're the only ones left who believe in the true original American ideals of freedom and liberty. For those of you who are conservatives and you say, but you also believe in big government, and that would mean you don't see anything wrong with having government in citizens' lives on a daily basis, you think the size of government for the better part of a half century or more has been just fine, that only lately has government gotten out of control, then you, my friend, are a liberal. You aren't a conservative. You're a government knows best liberal. You can label yourself a conservative, but when you start telling me your positions on issues, I immediately can peg you as a government solutions person. A conservative believes in having the government dictate behaviors and ideals to the American citizens in a way they agree with. They don't believe in giving the individual unrestricted choice in living their lives. They believe in telling others how to live. Not totally, but still believe in government knowing best. On the other side, a libertarian believes that adults can make their own decisions for themselves. If those decisions aren't infringing on anyone else's rights, then that's the only bar that needs to be hurdled. Now, this is how our founders wanted it. This is why they set up the government the way they did. But if we aren't going to hold government accountable, if we aren't going to make government follow the Constitution, then why even have it? You can't allow government to have an inch of power more than given to it in the Constitution, because government will always push for more. They'll try to outgrow the constraints that have been placed on it. Now, our founders were smart enough to know human nature, to know how humans would act when given power over others. Now, combat this, they limited government and how much it could do. But if we don't enforce those limits, then why have them at all? This isn't the first time we've had scandals in government. Every time something like this comes out, we get outraged, but then nothing substantial ever happens. Yeah, I hate how the government's spying on people, but don't ask me to do anything about it. I don't have to go vote. I don't have to take the time to go to a rally to support a libertarian candidate who believes in less government. I don't have to do all that. That's the problem. That's the type of thinking that isn't going to fix what's wrong. We're going to have to band together to elect people who will fight this sort of thing, fight to roll back government. Congress could fix this again. Like I said, they could fix it tomorrow. Vote to shut all this down, vote to stop all this government intrusion, but they don't want it to end. I'll tell you what they do want. They want the media coverage of it to end, because if they truly wanted to do something about these scandals, they would. But they're not. And that's why it's up to us to get people in office who will do something about it. All right, we're up on the bottom of the hour break already here on the Patrick Regan Show. Coming up next segment, we have a bunch of stuff. We're going to talk a little bit more about the spying, and we'll try to hit on this nullification that I tried to hit on last week. We'll see if we can get started on that. Coming up in the next half hour of the Patrick Regan Show. We're back here on the Patrick Regan Show. Jay, did you say WN on that last high note? Was that you?
It was most certainly not me.
First of all, you wouldn't be singing on that song. Second of all, you're a alto, not a soprano, right?
Exactly. You know, the saddest part is you were singing along to that song. I watched it.
Yeah. Oh, there's a part of me that likes that music.
I could just see you jamming down the road, windows down, just jamming out to Mariah Carey.
Oh, yeah. Okay, funny you should mention that. No lie. This is absolutely the truth. Come out of the Kroger yesterday, and here comes a kid in his little rice burner car, tinted windows down. No lie, he's playing ABC 123 by wasn't that the Jacksons?
Yes.
Booming that out of the stereo.
The special bass mix.
Yes. And I thought, I would probably not be playing that if I was cruising.
It could be worse. I've heard some really bad things coming out of speakers just like that going around parking lots.
Well, I kept thinking, I keep thinking I hear that ABC one, and here he came driving by, just slow and leaning back and cruising. I thought,
hydraulics going up and down.
Yeah, exactly. I thought, all right, okay, whatever. All right. This segment, I want to get to something I've been trying to get to for a couple of weeks, and there's just so much going on. It's hard, and I actually don't have time to get to it this week. I had a lot of other stuff, but I'm just canning that, and I'm going to get to this because it's really important. A lot of people ask me, what can I do? What can we do against all this? Everything that's just coming out. A lot of people feel powerless against it, feel like there's whatever they do, nothing's working. Voting for these people, and it doesn't matter who we're sending up. They're screwing us over, no matter which party it is, which is another reason to send libertarians up, but that's something for another day. This segment, I want to introduce some of you, and I fear a lot of you, to the idea of something called nullification. And you might have heard it kicked around here or there, but nothing has really been talked about in length that I've seen in the media, mainly because they disagree with it at this point in time, because it is being used to nullify overbearing federal laws and regulations, something the news media thinks is a good thing, not the nullification, the federal laws and regulations. Now, nullification at the state level is what is happening when states pass laws stating they will not be complying with federal statutes such as banning marijuana or enforcing unconstitutional gun laws, things of that nature. States have been slowly coming around to putting a stop to all these federally mandated regulations and laws through various means of nullification, either directly through noncompliance with them or indirectly through non-enforcement. One of the state's duties to its citizens is to protect them from an intrusive and overbearing federal government. If the citizens of a state decide the federal government is overstepping its bounds, then they can decide to ignore it. Well, here's an excerpt from the Second Amendment Protection Act, which was signed into law in Kansas a few weeks ago. This was in response to all the gun regulations. It says, any act, law, treaty, order, rule, or regulation of the government of the United States which violates the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States is null, void, and unenforceable in the state of Kansas. Now, the law prohibits state and local agents in Kansas from participating in any federal gun control measures restricting the individual right to keep and bear arms as understood when Kansas became a state in 1861. It also makes it illegal for any federal agent to enforce any law, treaty, order, rule, or regulation regarding firearms that are manufactured, owned, and remain within Kansas, the borders of the state. Now, violators, the agents who violate that, could face felony charges, and the state prosecutors will serve federal agents with violating the law with a complaint and summons. So if the federal government tries to enforce any type of law or UN treaty regarding firearms that are created and stay entirely within the state of Kansas, the federal agents will be getting a summons. Now, there's been a whole lot of other states that did this too. I'm just picking out Kansas because I really like the language of their law. Now, this is exactly as it should be. And in fact, nowhere in the Constitution does the federal government have the authority to impose a federal gun law on the states or the citizens. They have the power to regulate interstate commerce, but in doing so, they are not allowed to violate or impinge on the rights guaranteed citizens in the Constitution. Now, James Madison, who the president recently quoted in his speech, we covered that on a show a couple of weeks ago when he erroneously referred to Mr. Madison as Jane Madison. If you want to hear that, you can go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Patrick Reagan Show. But back to my point. James Madison, he wrote, and I'm paraphrasing to shorten this up, should an unwarranted measure of the federal government be unpopular in particular states, the means of opposition to it are powerful and at hand. The disquietude of the people, their repugnance, and perhaps refusal to cooperate with officers of the Union, that being the federal government. The embarrassment created by legislative devices, which would often be added on such occasions, would oppose in any state very serious impediments. And where the sentiments of the several adjoining states happen to be in union, would present obstructions which the federal government would hardly be willing to encounter. In other words, if one state had a problem with the federal government, it can present some impediments to it, just as Kansas has done. If several states have the same problem, then they could present such an obstruction that the federal government would not be able to overcome it. And that's how it should be. In case you forgot or maybe didn't realize, or you might not have listened to this show before, the people came first, then the states, then the federal government. That's how the power is distributed. The people hold all the power, all of the freedom. The states are given some defined powers by the people, and even more limited and defined power is given to the federal government. Just read the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. What that does is put people at the top of that power structure, then the states, then the federal government. All right, is it already 15 till, Jay? Wow, I thought for a second my clock was wrong. We are already up on the last break here on the Patrick Reagan Show. I didn't get to half that nullification stuff, but we will work through it hopefully next show because I got some other stuff I want to talk about during this last segment regarding the Oregon transplant thing we had come up this week with Sebelius and the court. We'll hit that in a couple of minutes right after these messages. Welcome back to the Patrick Riggins Show. Good song for this show, the Authority song. Not that we rebel against authority, we just demand it respect us, as it should. This last segment, real quick, an AP story ran this week, and it's a story that's been running the past few weeks. A federal judge on Wednesday ordered HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius to allow 10-year-old Sarah Murnahan to be moved to the adult lung transplant list, giving her a better chance of receiving a potentially life-saving transplant. The quick and unusual ruling, made after a hastily scheduled emergency hearing, follows a campaign by the family and some members of Congress to pressure the Obama administration to change a federal policy that puts children under age 12 at the bottom of the list of those who can receive donated adult lungs. Apparently, the patient had cystic fibrosis, and the doctors say she may only live a few weeks without the transplant, and she had been on the waiting list for 18 months. But let's see, there's no guarantee that even with the judge's ruling, a suitable donor will be available in time, but her odds would be better. Now, the case played out amid growing controversy with Sebelius in the spotlight. Several right-wing blogs and commentators depicted her as a one-woman death panel. The child's mother said Sebelius was choosing to let children die. The judge's action may have taken some of the immediate heat off Sebelius in the Obama administration, yet it opened up a host of other questions about organ donation policy and hot-button healthcare politics. I've been asked a lot this week about what I think about this, and of course, my answer usually offends those who aren't ready to live in a free and open society. I think this is a bad idea, pressuring to have certain patients moved up or down a list to receive donated organs. Now, I see the motivation for it. These parents had a child who was going to die, so they're going to try to do everything they needed to do to prevent that outcome. But what about the next patient? What about the patient who is 10 years old? Or what about the patient that's 80 years old? So who's too young? Or who's too old? Do you see why this is a bad idea? To have people essentially choosing who lives and who dies. In this article and all over the rest of the media, this has been referred to as a one-woman death panel. Is a 5-woman death panel any better? How about a 5-woman, 5-men death panel? Does that make it any easier to swallow? Any way you look at it, we have people making life and death decisions about others. Is that what we want in this country? Well, Patrick, can you think of a better way? Sure. You're not going to want to hear it. But it's let people buy and sell their organs. After all, am I not the owner of my body? If I own something, is it not up to me to decide if I want to sell it? So why is that illegal? But Patrick, you're trying to make money off selling organs, and that's not right. But they're my organs, correct? Well, that's still not right. It's not fair. Well, does everyone who needs critical heart surgery get it? Does everyone who needs any critical care in any area receive it? Or do people get dropped by the wayside? Does it make a difference if the person needing the organ lives in another country rather than this one? Is a human being in this country more valuable than a human being in another? If so, who decides that? Is it okay to have someone deciding who is more important and who isn't? When you can't answer these questions, or if you agree that having people decide the fate of others is not the correct answer, then you should err on the side of freedom and liberty, not tyranny and control. Now, Walter Williams wrote a column about this very thing back in October of 2002. He was talking about organ transplant market. Lord Cohen, a law professor at George Mason University, he envisioned letting people contract in advance to permit the harvesting of any usable organs when they die. Now, the money earned would become part of their estate. And many people are offended by the notion of human body parts becoming commodities for sale. But there's at least a tiny bit of inconsistency because there's a market for human blood, semen, and hair. he also said, won't organs be very costly? Well, economists David Kasserman and A.H. Barnett, along with others, estimate that the organ shortage would be resolved at prices of about $1,000 to $3,000 per donor. To the extent that markets would eliminate organ shortages, it would significantly reduce their healthcare costs. Another concern is that if there's a market for organs, poor people will sell their organs and become ill. And the proposals made so far provide monetary payments be made for only cadaver organs. But from a strictly ethical point of view, Mr. Williams argues, people should be able to dispose of their organs for whatever reason they please. If we agree that people have property rights in themselves, they own themselves, they have a right to dispose of themselves any way they please, so as long as they do not violate the property rights of others. Now, he goes on to say he'd surely prefer a person who might be unwilling to give me his kidney to find motivation to sell me his kidney rather than let him do without. Some people have also argued that the organ transplant market would lead to murder and the sale of the victim's organs to unscrupulous organ brokers. Now, of course, murder will remain illegal and punishable. However, when the sale of a commodity is illegal, there's a heightened potential for illegal activity and social disorder. And he gives the example of during Prohibition, there was far more criminal activity associated with alcohol manufacture, distribution, and consumption than there is now. To the extent that prohibition of organ sales reduces their supply, holding all else equal, there's a greater incentive for illegal activities involving organ transplants, including murder. This is the same thing we say about the drug war. Prohibition leads to greater violence, a lesson we just can't seem to learn no matter how much we try. But my point being, do you own your own body or not? Everyone else makes money on organ transplants. Why not the donor as well? The doctor gets paid. The hospital gets paid. The people transporting the organs get paid. Why is it all of a sudden a bad thing for the donor to get money as well? Yet when I bring up the point, everyone gets offended. Even while agreeing that it's only fair the donor get money if everyone else does too. This is where it gets dicey in deciding if you really want to live in a free society or not. A lot of these kinds of questions and issues make you think about your core principles, about whether or not you trust the ideals of freedom and liberty. Do you want to accept the responsibilities of living in this type of society? Or have you grown accustomed to having decisions made for you by others, being told what to do in certain areas of your life? Unfortunately, it's a lot like the movie The Matrix, for those who remember that. Most people aren't ready to be free, to have their mind freed from the machine. They want someone else in control. They want to feel like they're being taken care of. They want that mother coddling them throughout their entire lives. They don't want to grow up. They don't want to live as a true free adult. These are the people we have to convert or outvote. We are already living what happens if we don't. The test is, can we reverse this course before we fall too far down the rabbit hole to come back? All right, this show has just flown by. This hour has gone by quickly here on the Patrick Riggin Show on our station here, News Talk 987 WOKI. If you want more information about our show, you can pop over to our Facebook page at facebook.com/Patrick Riggins Show. Riggins is Riggins show. And be sure and hit that like button when you're over there. If you want, our archive shows are at youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show. youtube.com/Patrick Riggins Show. You can always drop us a card or letter here, Old Kingston Pike, WOKI, Knoxville, Tennessee. Join me again next Saturday afternoon at 4, where we'll be fighting for freedom, liberty, and the restoration of the Constitution. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.
Join us again next week for a solid dose of truth on the Patrick Riggins Show.